Good day, everyone. I am Sherwin Potrido, and together with my co-members, Raymond Quiros and Mr. Jason Rafols, we will discuss about the fundamentals of taxation. So what is the nature of taxation? Taxation is a state power exercised through the country's legislative body. The principle of taxation states that taxes are collected to support the government in its expenses and services for public welfare. Reciprocal duties of protection and support between the state and its citizens. The Constitution also states that revenues through taxation must only be used for government operations and for public welfare. It is inherent in sovereignty. The power of taxation exists independent of any legislation. There is no need to enact a law to exercise that power because that power springs at the moment you have the existence of the state. This is inherent because this is based on necessity. So what is the purpose of taxation? The purpose of taxation is to raise revenues from all possible sources to support government expenditures and services and to promote the general well-being and protection of its citizens. Taxes safeguard newly opened industries to pioneering and new industries and other enterprises. Taxes also shield domestic producers by levying a much higher custom duties on imported goods. The most basic function of taxation is to fund government expenditures. Varying justifications and explanations for taxes have been offered throughout the history. Early taxes were used to support the ruling classes, raise armies, and build defenses. Most often, the authority to tax stemmed from divine or supernatural rights. It is also used to provide funds or property with which to promote the general welfare of its citizens and to enable it to finance its multifarious activities. It is also used to reduce inequalities in wealth and income by imposing progressively higher taxes. And lastly, it is also used to prevent inflation by increasing taxes or ward off depression by decreasing taxes. Next to be discussed is the canons of taxation. It refers to the basic principles of a sound tax system which identify the following: fiscal adequacy, administrative feasibility, and theoretical justice. By canons of taxation, we simply mean the characteristics or qualities which a good tax system should possess. In fact, canons of taxation are related to the administrative part of a tax. Adam Smith first devised the principle of canons of taxation in 1776 in his book, Wealth of Nations. The first principle of a tax system is fiscal adequacy. Fiscal adequacy means the sources of revenue must be sufficient to meet government expenditures and other public needs. Revenues must be capable of adjusting to variations in public expenditures. Taxes collected by the Bureau of International Revenue, or BIR, must be sufficient enough to fund the necessary government expenditures and the basic services in a given fiscal year. An example of fiscal adequacy is the increase of taxes imposed by the government on its citizens to meet public expenditures. The second character of a good tax system is administrative feasibility. Payment of taxes must be taxpayer-friendly. Administrative feasibility refers to the ability to obtain approvals from other offices and agencies. The availability of treatment, storage, and disposal services and capacity, and the requirements for and availability of specific equipment and technical specialists. Administrative feasibility also assures us that the tax system should be as simple as possible, clear, concise, and capable of enforcement, and convenient as to time and manner of how taxes are assessed, collected, and compiled with. The last characteristic of a good tax system should possess is theoretical justice. Theoretical justice, in principle, dictates that the laws should be equitable, that is, they should be based on the taxpayer's ability to pay. In other words, those who have more should be taxed more, meaning that the higher your income, the bigger taxes you will pay.
Hello everyone, I am Raymond Quiros, and for today's video, I will be continuing what Mr. Potrido started, which is the fundamental of taxation. So let us move to the basis of taxation. So the basis of taxation is found in the reciprocal duties of protection and support between the state and its inhabitants. So in return for this contribution, the taxpayer receives the general advantages and protection which the government affords the taxpayer and his property. So this is the so-called benefits received principle. One is compensation or consideration for the other, and protection for support and support for protection. So these are, first, the constitution or the fundamental law of the land. Second is the statutes, laws passed with the Congress or the presidential decrees. Third is the Bureau of International Revenue rules and regulations. Fourth is judicial decisions on tax cases by the Supreme Court. Fifth is the provincial or city and municipal ordinances. Sixth is the observance of international agreements and administrative rulings and opinions. Next, we move to the objects of taxation. So the objects of taxation is to raise resources for the state. It can be used to reduce inequalities, to accelerate economic development, as a tool to regulate consumption, imports and exports, in addition to its basic objective of raising revenues. First is the individuals who earn a considerable amount of income as a worker or as a businessman in partnerships or corporations, including those who inherited a property or given a gift or donation of a considerable value. Next is tangible and intangible properties, whether personal properties, which is the movable properties that can be moved or relocated, or real properties, or immovable properties. And lastly, the transactions, consumptions, interest, imports, and exports and privileges. Next, we move to the status of taxation, which the status word is a Latin term for place or location, which means the place where taxes are paid. So first, we have income tax, which is paid either in the place where the income is earned or the place of residence of the taxpayer. So an income tax is a tax imposed on individuals or entities in respect of the income of profits earned by them. So income tax generally is computed as the product of a tax rate times the taxable income. So the taxation rates may vary by type or characteristics of the taxpayer and the type of income. Next is real property tax, which is paid where the property is situated. So we can come up to this question: what are the real property tax rates in the Philippines? So the exact tax rates depend on the location of the property in the Philippines. So the real property tax rate for Metro Manila, Philippines is 2% of the assessed value of the property, which the provincial rate is 1%. Next, we have personal property tax. So taxes on intangible properties are paid in the place where the property is located. So similar to real property tax. So status of taxation of intangible property is the owner's domicile. So this refers to the place of permanent residence of the owner. So personal property is defined as any movable property that is not attached to a home or building. So the requirements for personal property tax vary from state to state and mostly affect businesses. Lastly, we have business and occupation taxes, which is paid in the place where the business or occupation is located. So in addition, business and occupation tax or gross receipt tax means a tax imposed or measured by the value of products. So the gross income of the business or the gross proceeds of sales, as the case may be, and that is the legal liability of the business. Next, we move to the limitations of taxation, where the inherent limitations are rooted in the nature of taxation itself. So these are the limitations that are not affected by changes in the provisions of constitutions. First, we have the tax revenues must only be used for public purposes. Next is there should be proper delegation of legislative power to tax. Third is government entities are exempted. Fourth is there are territorial jurisdictions. Fifth and last is there is an observance of international law. And that will be all for my part. Thank you guys for watching and I hope you've learned something. Bye!
Hello everyone. My name is Jason Rafols, and today I'm going to be talking about the constitutional limitations of taxations. Now, in the 1987 Philippine Constitution sets limitations on exercise of the power of tax. Now, the rule of taxation shall be uniform and equitable. The Congress shall evolve a progressive system of taxations. According to the Article 6, Section 28, Paragraph 1. Now, all money collected on any task levied for a special purpose shall be treated as a special fund and paid out for such purposes only. So, if the purpose for which a special fund was created had been fulfilled or abandoned, the balance, if any, shall be transferred to general funds of the government. Now, the government may, by law, authorize the President to fix within specified limits and the subjects to such limitations and restrictions as it may impose tariff rates, import and export quotas, tonnage and wharfage dues, and other duties or imposts within the framework of the National Development Program of the government. Now, there are branches of this said law, and that is, number one is the observance of due process. Now, observance of due process means that no person shall be held to answer for a criminal offense without due process of law. Now, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall be presumed innocent until contrary is proved. Now, innocent until proven guilty, shall be enjoy the right to be heard by himself and counsel. Now, to be informed by the nature of cause and accusation against him, to have a speedy, impartial, and public trial, to meet the witnesses face to face, and to have a compulsory process to secure the attendance of witnesses and production of evidence on his behalf. Now, however, after arraignment trial may proceed notwithstanding the absence of the accused, provided that he may duly notified and his failure to appear is unjustifiable. Next is the equal protection of law. Now, Section 1, which means no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now, nor shall any person be denied an equal protection of the law. Now, the equal protection of the law clause is against undue favor of individual or class privilege. Now, as well as hostile discrimination or oppression of inequality, it is not intended to prohibit legislation which is limited either in the object to which it is directed at the territory within which it is operating. Now, for example, if the normal person or government official kills someone, someone will be prosecuted in the same manner on both the provision of punishment will also be the same. Now, moving on into the uniformity of equity rule. Now, uniformity and equity rule. So the rule of this is must be uniform and equitable, likewise progressive. Now, for example, commentators often refine the ability to pay fairness concept by subdividing into the horizontal equity components. Now, taxpayers with equal incomes should pay equal amounts of tax, and a vertical equity component, which are the taxpayers with unequal incomes, should be pay amount of tax which are sufficient and equal to the fairly reflect and difference in their incomes. Next is number 4 is the non-imprisonment for non-paying of poll tax. So this means that no person shall be imprisoned for debt or non-payment for poll tax. Section 21. No person shall be twice but in jeopardy of punishment for the same offense. Now, if an act is punished by law and an ordinance, conviction or acquittal under either shall constitute a bar to another prosecution for the same act. Now, no one can be imprisoned for non-payment of debt. True, however, they can be imprisoned for committing crimes such as selling a personal property that they mortgage while the debt is still unpaid, or the use of deceit to make the debtor part with the money. Next is no appropriation for religious purposes. Now the Liberty of conscience, secured by the provision of this constitutional, shall not be so construed as to excuse the act of licentiousness, now, or justify practices inconsistent with the peace and safety of the state. Now, this means that no public money or property shall be appropriated for or applied to any religious worship, exercise, or instruction, or to the support of the religious establishment. No religious qualifications shall be required for any public offense or employment, nor shall any person, no, I'm talking about any person, being competent as a witness of juror of consequence of his opinion on the matter of the religion, nor the question touching his religious belief in any court of justice to affect the weight of his testimony. Now, that's all for the Constitution and the limitations of tax. Now, next is I'm going to be talking about the avoid taxations. Now, there are some concepts which related to taxation in terms of avoidance of non-payment. Number one is the shifting. Now, profit shifting is a technique where it is used by multinational corporation to pay less to pay less to pay less than pay less tax than they should have. That involves multinational corporation moving the profit it makes in the country where it manufactures products or sells goods and services into a tax haven. Now, by shifting profits into a tax haven. Now, this means that multinational corporations underreports the value of its process in the countries where it may produces or sells goods and services, so they would pay less or no tax in that country at all. Now, the profit shifted into a tax haven when gets taxed at a very low rate or no to all, depending on whether the tax haven has a very low corporate tax rate or no corporate tax rate. Next is the capitalization. So tax law. So capitalization means that tax law limits your business deduction in two main ways. Now, the amount and the timing. Now, when you capitalize a business expenses, you cannot deduct full payment amount of expenses for the tax year in which you incur the expenses. Now, however, even though you do not get an immediate deduction, you can usually recover the full amount of the expense over a period of multiple years. Next is the tax avoidance, which is when an individual or company legally exploits the tax systems to reduce tax liabilities. Now, such as establishing an offshore company in a tax haven. Simply put, it means excuse me. Simply put, it means paying as little tax as possible while still staying on the right line of the law. Now, next is why is tax avoidance illegal? So we're going to talk about why is tax avoidance illegal. Now, to be quite frankly, no. Tax avoidance cannot be called legal. Because a lot of what gets called tax avoidance falls into a legal gray area. So to avoid paying income tax on the interest earned by your cash savings, investing money into a pension scheme, or claiming capital allowances and things used for business corporations or purposes. Next is tax evasion, which is consequently what was employed to minimize tax was a tax avoidance scheme. Now, the Supreme Court thus held that there was no tax evasion. So tax evasion, meanwhile, it is a scheme used outside of the lawful means. So it cannot connotes fraud through the use of pretenses or forbidden device to lessen or defeat taxes. Now, under the reporting income, perhaps you earned some income on tips or walking dogs into school. So if you don't report all your income, you can be found guilty to tax evasion. Taking an earned deduction, this commonly occurs when taxpayers claims their expenses on their taxes that they did not incur. So that was tax evasion. Now moving on into the exemption, which I think is probably the last part of this report. So yeah, tax exemption is the right to exclude all of your income from taxations by federal or state governments. Now this means that when most taxpayers are entitled to various exemptions to reduce their taxable income, and certain individuals and organizations are completely exempt from paying their taxes. Now, the government typically exempts organizations from income tax entirely when they serve a public good, such as religious or charitable organizations. So, the government eliminates the tax burden of certain organizations. Now, it also helps them further promotes the public welfare. So that is pretty much it for my report. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something from this report. And my name is Jason Rafols. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. 1, 2, 3.